I do want to give a disclaimer that there is a scene in this video that depicts self-harm in children, so if that is a trigger for you, you might not want to watch this video. Thank you. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I am back with 3 true scary stories from Reddit that are all supposedly true, and I can't wait to get started with you today. These scary stories are particularly realistic because they are all about creep encounters, being followed, being watched, being stalked. We've got it all. I've saved my favorite for last, so without further ado, let's get started. Sometimes at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd go for a run around the neighborhood. I hadn't been doing well mentally, and running was the last destructive activity in my life. One night, I decided to run to the local high school. I jogged from my house, down the mile stretch down the road, and ended up at the football stadium. I ran a few laps around the track and then started down the bleachers. I was feeling pretty good until something washed over me. It was the sense that I was being watched. For a split second, I thought, just keep going. And as I went to climb the next step, the memory of a story that my grandfather once told me resurfaced. One night, when he was 7 or 8, my grandfather told me a story that he had woke up to a man staring at him from outside his bedroom window. When he got close to the window, the man leapt down from the second-story ledge. My grandfather said that the man had vanished, but that an elongated animal on 4 very long legs scurried away from the house. He told this story only once after I had mocked native legends. I thought it was just an old man's tale. I had forgotten his story until that moment. When chills ran through my body, I knew something was watching me. I wanted more than anything to forget about it so that I could finish my routine, but something calling within, call it intuition, urged me to leave. That fear was stronger than my thoughts of rationality, as fear tend to be. I called my mom. She answered. I said that I knew it was too late to bother her and that I was sorry, but something didn't feel right about the stadium. She said, I need you to run home, and whatever you do, keep your eyes in front of you. Do not turn back. I'm going to meet you halfway. Stay on the phone. Do not hang up. I'm coming. I didn't understand why she was as panicked, and I felt awful for bothering her. As I was exiting the stadium gates, my blood ran cold. A man in a wide-rimmed straw hat was leaning against the chain-linked fence that surrounded the campus. He was smiling. This excited smile that I will never forget. I jogged past him. He nodded at me and said, "Time for fun." I bolted. I didn't look back. I invoked the name of Jesus. I prayed to whatever higher power there was. I asked angels to protect me. I was running until I saw the headlights of my mom's car. Later, she told me that when people like us have big feelings like that, it's evolutionary. The way prey can sense a predator. She suspects it was a dark creature, one that was drawn to people going through a deep depression. From then on, I decided to never run alone again after sunset. This story comes from the user LegalPlant4868 on Reddit in the subreddit Let's Not Meet. I have gotten some feedback from this story, and while some people think it sounds really far-fetched, I personally don't. I've definitely had that natural born feeling before where you feel like something is coming for you, you feel like you're being hunted, and it's like the worst feeling in the world. Maybe I'm just a chicken, maybe I'm just a paranoid person. But feeling that alone in the dark is one of the worst feelings you can possibly have. Thank you, Legal Plant, for letting me use your story, and let's move on to the next one. Hello, Let's Not Meet. I am a long-time lurker, but first-time poster. After reading similar stories, I feel it's time that I came forward with my own. Out of respect for everyone's privacy, names in this story will be changed. The important people to know are me and my cousin, who we'll call Drew, and some of the prominent neighborhood kids we'll call Josh, Kylie, and Evan, and of course, Gabe. To set this story, this was around the time my mom and dad got divorced. It wasn't a clean divorce, and there was a lot going on at the time. My mom had to move out of the school district into a small home and quickly, and my dad kept our house in the neighborhood. I bring this up to explain that although my 2 brothers decided to stay with my dad, me and my cousin, who lived with us most of the time, decided to move in with my mom. The issue is that my mom's new place wasn't within the school district, which meant no buses. So the setup was that she would bring us to school before work, and after school we would catch the bus to my dad's house and stay there for a couple of hours until she got off work. Now that everything is explained, let's get into what you're really here for. This is my friend Gabe. There were quite a few kids in our neighborhood, and I guess you could say we all got along and hung out quite a bit. We would all ride the bus together, hang out after school, and hell, even try to build forts in the moss. The moss was a spot in the woods that you could access through a small opening at the end of the cul-de-sac. This is important for later. It was an everyday thing for us, until one day a new family moved into the neighborhood, and with them was their son, Gabe. He had brown hair and he was skinny. We first met Gabe on the school bus, us being curious about a new kid in the neighborhood, and we were all eager to talk to him. You'd probably think that we got some kind of vibe off of him, or maybe something about him was creepy, but honestly, he just seemed like a regular kid. He seemed to fit in with the other kids in the neighborhood. It became normal to see me, Josh, Kylie, Drew, Evan, and Gabe all hanging out, rather all of us or a combination of the few. After getting to know him, we learned that Gabe actually used to go to our school but got expelled after he threw stuff at a teacher, only just so that the teacher could let him back into our school. Back then we brushed it off as something edgy that he did, but knowing the events now, it should have been the first red flag. You see, Gabe, Drew, and I all became close. I'd argue closer than the other kids. I would have considered him a friend instead of just another neighborhood kid to hang out with. Which is why we didn't immediately drop him after the following events. I wasn't there for this, but I heard about it after the fact. Drew and I got off the bus one day and immediately noticed that Gabe wasn't there. We sat next to each other every day on the bus. I just assumed he was absent and Drew decided to sit by me. Kylie and Evan, who sat near us, started talking about something that happened and we joined into their conversation. Apparently, not long after Drew and I left to go to my mom's, Gabe invited Kylie, Evan, and Josh to his house. Now, I don't remember what set the motion or what really happened, but the hangout ended with Gabe chasing Josh home with a knife in his hands. Josh lived on the other side of the neighborhood, and once he got home to his mother came out to see what was going on as she heard yelling from her front yard, and when she stepped out, Gabe chased them both inside. The scariest part? They had heard from Josh that he was laughing and had a smile on his face when he did it, like he enjoyed terrorizing them. The cops were called, and honestly, I don't know what came out of it other than Gabe was gone from school for a few days after that. When he came back, he acted like nothing ever happened. The kids in our neighborhood started growing apart from Gabe after that, especially John, who I never actually saw talk to him again. I mean, who would blame him? I guess I felt bad for Gabe a little bit. My stupid brain must have decided it was a bad prank that went too far or something like that. Oh, how dumb was I? I truly believe that Gabe changed after that, like something clicked in his brain. Not long after, we were on the bus and I was talking to him as we sat in the seats. All of a sudden, he just pulled a pencil out and tried to stab me with it. Not only tried, but he did stab me. In the neck. Luckily, it only broke the skin, but it shocked me. He laughed like he was joking and I decided to move seats. When I got off, I felt the need to explain what happened to the bus driver. I never should have done that. I believe, to this day, that was the one choice that caused what happened next. He was kicked off the bus for a couple of days. When he returned, they made him sit at the front of the bus. He knew it was me who snitched on him. When I walked past him to get off the bus, he would glare at me, and it felt evil. He called me names, a snitch, and I was scared of him. Fast forward a week later, and all the kids in our neighborhood just decided that they wouldn't hang out with Gabe anymore. I wish I could stay the same. After everything I had spilled to you all, I was naive, dumb. Eventually, he messaged me apologizing and messaged to ask if Drew and I wanted to hang out. I don't know why, but we agreed. I think I remember him saying that he and some other kids were going to hang out by the moss and build forts, and I think that's why we agreed, because other kids would be there. So we set off to meet him at his house, which was just down the street from ours. We knocked on the door, and he answered it, holding a knife. Screw the red flag. I was ignoring a whole red alarm at this point. It was a kitchen knife with some kind of orange handle. With a smile on his face, he held up his arm and just started cutting himself. We should have just left there. Why didn't we just leave? After a couple of cuts, he laughed like it was some sort of joke. It wasn't until now that I realized that this kid was absolutely psychotic. Like something was really wrong with him. He had a couple of tools with him and told us to follow him to the moss, and for some dumb reason, we did. I was holding out hope that he'd be normal when all the other kids were there. We got to a small opening in the moss and walked in. To get to the pond in the moss, you had to go down a slightly steep hill and through the bush, and you'd be there. I bet you could feel my surprise when I realized that nobody else was there. I looked at Gabe, who just chuckled. "They must be late. Let's get started," he said to me. Both Drew and I were on edge, but I bet Gabe could feel it. "Hey, OP, go find some sticks and logs to build a fort," he told me. He pointed over towards the pond. I obeyed and made my way over to the area. About 10 or 15 seconds later, I started walking, and then I got the feeling to turn around. And I'll never, ever stop thanking God for doing just that. Gabe was there, creeping up to my cousin, who was picking up a large rock. Gabe had a hoe-looking tool in his hand, raising it slowly. I shouted, "Hey!" towards them. My cousin jolted up, and Gabe quickly lowered the hoe and looked at me in confusion. I ran to them, telling them that my mom messaged me, and it was time to go. That was a lie. My phone only worked on Wi-Fi at the time. I felt that Gabe knew that I had saw him, so I grabbed my cousin, who didn't wait for a second to question me, and we quickly started leaving. And at that moment, he chased us. We booked it through the woods for a solid half a minute and got to the steep part, quickly climbing up it. I looked back and saw Gabe with a face that I could only describe as a psychopath's, still chasing us. I prayed that we wouldn't fall. Thank God that we didn't. Luckily, Gabe struggled a bit, giving us time to bolt out to the entrance. We ran halfway up the street and turned around. Gabe wasn't there. In fact, we never saw him leave. We went home, and the next day we told some of the other kids what happened. The weirdest part is, though, we never saw Gabe again. Not on the bus or at school. Very shortly, his parents moved from that house, and my dad moved out of the neighborhood a year later, with my mom finding a newer house within our district. This was years ago. I recently looked Gabe up to see what happened to him, but nothing came up. No Facebook page, no Instagram, nothing. It's like he just vanished. Like he never existed in the first place, but I know he did. I don't live anywhere near there anymore, and thank God for that. Gabe, I don't know where you are or what happened to you, but let's agree to never fucking meet again. This story was called My Friend Gabe, and it was on Reddit on the subreddit Let's Not Meet by the user Skodd, who also has a YouTube channel that I'm going to credit called Skodd on YouTube. Thank you, Skodd, for letting me use this story. I really appreciate it. This story is absolutely horrifying. It was actually tied for me for the scariest story that I'm going to be reading today. I think it's so disturbing, and there were definitely some kids kind of like that when I was growing up. And I tried to distance myself from them, but it was always really scary because you never knew. When you're a kid, you're so vulnerable. And that's a horrifying concept. So thank you again for letting me use that story. And we're going to go on to the next one, which is called The Joshua Tree Creeper. This is a long story, but the setup leads to the outcome. Buckle up. For over a decade, I made an annual pilgrimage to Joshua Tree National Park in Southern California. It would have been spring of 1999. No smartphones, no Wi-Fi, no MapQuest. At that time, the roads in the park were largely sand and unpaved. There was no water in the park, and you needed to fill up at whatever entrance you were at. I don't recall ever seeing a manned park ranger booth during the day anytime there. I did a climbing loop through the Utah Canyon carry-on lands, Zion and Arches, and then Joshua Tree, so I had an annual pass. Not that anyone was checking. There was construction going on at the park at the time. They were improving some of the roads, and there was more signage for the campground than there had been before. We had a construction crew with a trailer a few spots away from us. I don't remember what campground we were at, maybe Ryan or Jumbo Rocks. We had a favorite spot that had a cave in the back of the site. A great place to cool down in the afternoon heat and to seek shelter during the occasional rain or snowstorm that sometimes hit before dawn. The desert attracts weirdos. People seeking to get detached from civilization or running from problems. Charles Manson's Spawn Ranch was not far from there. Many bodies have been buried out here. We frequently met our fellow campers and had communal dinners with those we had met. We quickly met a guy named Chris from Virginia, maybe West Virginia. He had been living in the campground for a while and riding his bike, don't ask me how, to a job that he had at a diner in one of the park entrances. I don't remember if it was 29 Palms or Joshua Tree. Chris was an environmental activist, and he wasn't pleased with the park improvements. He would wax on how they shouldn't be making the park more accessible and had vandalized some of the signage. I didn't agree with his actions, but I did understand the sentiment. We also met a very mentally ill woman who had been living at the end of the cul-de-sac of the campground. She had shrines to something set up everywhere and empty bottles hanging from trees, odd decorations that she created with wire and trash. I remember she was wild-eyed, dark-haired, and very antisocial. She talked in word salad and, to herself, nonstop. We avoided her. There was also a white/cream Toyota wagon with Delaware plates next to the woman. The car was packed full of banker's boxes, and clearly someone had been living out of the car. It was an odd sight, as the roads were sand, and even in my Subaru, some roads were tough. The owner of the Toyota was a guy. His name started with a D, or had a D, but it has been lost to time. Maybe Darren, or possibly Andrew. I've searched online for any trace of what I expect happened to him, but I've never found a thing. But anyway, D was odd. He was a businessman and just business casual. His demeanor was off. I was a therapist at the time, and I immediately got bad vibes. His story was that he had gotten a divorce and was doing some self-exploration. I didn't buy it. He oozed abusive and sociopath. He came to our campsite with Chris and stayed long beyond his welcome. My climbing partner was an aspiring actress, largely theater, and was a social butterfly. Dee would turn any questions back to us, a common way to change the narrative. My friend loved the attention and answered where she lived, worked, went to school, etc. I was horrified and sat quietly, trying to memorize everything about Dee. We later developed a safe word after this event. Dee was practically drooling over my friend, and she was welcoming it and sharing far too much. Dee finally left the camp, and we had already invited him to spaghetti dinner the next night with Chris. The next day, we didn't see Chris at all. No worries, maybe he was working. That evening, I cooked dinner, and my friend went to get Chris to join us. His camp was set up, but empty, and his bike was there. Dee came over for dinner and asked if we had seen Chris. He told us that Chris told him to meet him later that night off one of the jeep trails deep in the desert. I don't remember which trail now, but it was a well-known trail, deep in the desert, and we had encountered a jeep stuck out there a couple of days before. It wasn't really passable, and we definitely couldn't walk there. I agreed to drive us there after dinner. Dee was hyper-focused on my friend, even though we had said the "he's weird, don't give him any more personal details" talk. She was happy to have the attention. We had dinner and headed out to see Chris. I was driving, friend in the passenger seat, and Dee behind her. Dee had a backpack on his lap. I had a terrible feeling that there was a gun in it. We got to the remote location and Dee said Chris was going to meet us. We were 2+ hours from the nearest town and had no cell phone reception. Dee said, "This is the place. We need to get out and hike to Chris." My gut was telling me that if I left my car, I was dead. I kept imagining Dee pulling a gun to my friend's head and making me get out of the car to my death. It was pitch black out. The stars were the only light. I told Dee we aren't getting out. He was welcome to, but I was headed back to camp. Dee was pissed. I told him he could leave the vehicle. He did not. The drive back was silent. Dee was furious. I was terrified. Back at camp, still no Chris. Dee wanted to sit around the fire, and I said I was going to bed. My friend joined me, and very quietly we had a conversation of what had transpired. She agreed that Dee was dangerous, and also felt like he was going to pull something out of the backpack. We discussed driving back to J Tree or 29 Palms and going to the police, but what would we tell them? I had long purple dreads, my friend had bright red hair. We were in our early 20s, counterculture, and presenting to a military conservative town police force would likely result in us being dismissed, or worse, detained. We talked about going to the construction crew who was loudly drinking and playing poker. Again, 2 early girls in their 20s alone in the desert, that could go very bad for us too. We agreed to sleep in my blacked out Subaru that night. I carried a large machete I had brought back from the jungles of Belize. It was sharp, but a pretty clumsy weapon. My Subaru's windows were so dark that anytime I strayed out of East California on the I-10, I was pulled over and cited. It happened at least 5 times a year in our treks across Arizona, New Mexico, and especially Texas. I don't think either of us slept well that night. My friend previously told Dee that our next stop was Carlbad Caverns. Dee was going to meet us there. When we got up, we quickly found that Dee was in our sight. "Where were you guys?" he asked. "I checked your tent." My blood ran cold. We told him we slept in the cave on the site that night. We asked if he had seen Chris. Nope. We were quickly packing up the camp to get the hell away from Dee. Dee told us he would meet us in Carlsbad. Friend and I had already changed plans to hit Mesa Verde instead. We checked Chris's site before we left camp. No Chris. His bike was still parked where it had been. We asked a wild-eyed lady if she had seen him. She said, not in a few days. We left and headed east. I truly believe it's possible that Dee killed Chris and was planning on killing us. I searched online in so many ways, trying to find anything on Dee or what he was running from. I took down his license plate number and full name in my journal, but never got a thing. I hope whatever Dee was running from caught up to him. Stay safe out there and always trust your gut. I sourced the story on the subreddit called Backwoods Creepy from a user named FuckYouMechP2. Thank you so much for letting me use your story, and I hope you never have an encounter like that again, because that is absolutely terrifying. Which story was your favorite? Let me know in the comment section down below. My name is Melody, you're watching my channel. This channel is called Melody Ever After. If you like creepy, spooky, mysterious, and the occult, I make lots of videos on that, as well as a lot of commentary and gaming content, so I would really appreciate it if you checked out my channel. Thank you again to these users who allowed me to use their stories. If you have a story that you want me to narrate, my email is in my bio. It is melodyeverafter02@gmail.com. You can email me any story that you were interested in me narrating, and you might see it in the next video. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Until next time.